Hi, guys. Welcome to the Simple Doesn't Mean Easy podcast. We are here twice a week, Mondays and Fridays, talking about simple little ways to simplify our lives, one day at a time. I'm your host, Michelle Visser, and this episode is about a truly alarming new study that just came out, and it focuses on just one chemical. And that chemical is used in a whole lot of places. We're going to break that down. And this study showed how this chemical is very specifically impacting the health of people around the world. Unfortunately, this chemical is in your kitchen. I'm sure of it. Some of our kitchens more than others. So the good news is I am breaking down 7 things that I personally am doing as a reaction to this study. Some of the things I've been doing here and there, little bits at a time in little parts, but I'm going all in on some of these and I'm going to share all 7 suggestions with you that truly can make a difference in a response to what we're going to talk about. But first, here's the thing. We know our food is depleted of nutrients, but we can work on restoring a healthy balance. And I'm excited to tell you, I have found whole food based supplements that are helping me do just that. Go to solelyrested.com/Azure, Azure, and find out more about this food supplier who is doing everything differently, better, and healthier, and who now has an amazing line of all natural supplements that are there to arm us against the uphill battles we face today. Again, go to solelyrested.com/Azure. I also list all my favorite things that I love to purchase from this food supplier. And be sure to use code SOLEYRESTED and save 15% off your first $100 order delivered to a drop near you. solelyrested.com/Azure. Okay, before we truly start, and I share that study with you that I told you about, because this episode could become pretty depressing if we let it, I want to start off on a positive note. I want to tell you that I am all about real food, but also I'm all about real life, and we have to keep those things in balance. So, well, you'll see. The number one thing I am doing to combat the craziness of the path I started to go down in my mind is to really take this all in stride and to not let myself panic about it. So remember that we're going to keep it in balance. We're going to. So this episode is all about plastic. And before I share the study, I wanted to share a little bit that I kind of came across. I went down the history of plastic because I really started wondering, how long has it been around, this chemical that the study was done on? Because I think to most of us, it feels like plastic has been around our whole life. And maybe for some of my listeners, it has been for sure. But I was really surprised the more I started thinking about it that it really is a relatively new thing. And we don't really think about that. I mean, the first reason that I think about that is when we moved into our old farmhouse 11 years ago now. The first spring we lived here, we discovered something I've only talked about a few times. We discovered a midden in our kind of our backyard. I mean, it's well removed, it's in a wooded area, so it's not like you step out of our back door and you're stepping on a trash heap. But a midden is very specifically an old trash heap where people long ago would toss the things they no longer wanted. And often in a midden, you can find some pretty cool treasures, I'm sure you could imagine. So the first spring, when there was a lot of rain, we were just walking through the woods and we noticed some erosion and we looked over and realized, oh, what's that really cool glass jar there? And that led to noticing a few other things, which led to us kind of inspecting the area more. And in a couple days span, we realized what we had here in our woods. And we kind of got almost addicted. We were kind of like treasure hunters coming back to the house every day with arms full of just what we were thinking were great treasures. And they were. Um, but how this relates to plastic, I was shocked, and I still am every time that I go back and kind of excavate this midden area. I'm shocked at the things that came in glass, and it really made me pause. It made me think about the fact that, oh, you know what? When I was a kid, plastic really wasn't around. And I was born in 69, just to be totally transparent. And I remember all the things in glass. You know, we pull some things out of this midden, which by the way, some of them are literally from the 1800s, right beside something that is from 1980. Like it's crazy. I don't know how it works. I don't know how things just shift, I guess. And the older things kind of surface right beside the newer things. I don't know how it works, but literally we find things made 200 years apart beside each other in this area as we look through things. But um I'm seeing some things and I'm remembering, wow, I remember these jars, like for this cleaner, let's say it's Clorox. We found some Clorox jars. Wow, they didn't come in plastic. And I forgot that. You see something. I think that's why retro things are so popular, to make a product look retro these days, because it just takes you back to your childhood and you remember things that you really had forgotten. And as soon as you see it, it's like this light bulb going off, like, oh, that's like I'm 8 again. I remember when I was 8, and that's the way, mom stored whatever or bought whatever. So in this midden, there are glass jars that held all kinds of everyday common things. Lots of medicine bottles, which that just seems so interesting to me, because as long as I can remember, I don't know. I mean, I do remember Bear aspirin, I'm pretty sure, in a glass jar. Or maybe it very well could be my parents had like their parents' jar of Bear aspirin. I don't know. But typically everything that I think of when I think of medicine, I think of those little medicine bottles that come from the pharmacy, the little brown plastic with the kid safe lid. But of course, until just 30, 40 years ago, those didn't exist. Everything, even the average everyday medicines, came in glass jars. And cough syrup. There's lots of cough syrup jars in our midden, and aspirin jars. But and the cleaners, like I said, there's Clorox, there's like a lot of mayo jars, peanut butter jars, a lot of jars you can't tell what they were, but I'm pretty sure they were probably for some sort of food or condiment. But that's the way things were sold, and nobody knew anything differently. So when was the switch and why? Well, plastic bottles were first used commercially. I was surprised, way back as far as 1947, but it was very few and far between because, not surprisingly, it was just too expensive. It wasn't cost effective. It was cheaper for a manufacturer to use glass than plastic back in the 40s, 50s, and even 60s. And then in the late 70s, my research told me, there was a development in the plastic world. They developed polyethylene, I don't know how to say this, terephthalate. And it was suddenly cheaper and easier for food companies to manufacture and transport. So that's something we don't think about a lot. Not just make, but it made it easier for them to transport things in plastic. So it was pretty quickly, pretty widespread, adopted by a lot of food companies. There was a little bit of a lag. The first one, from what I could find, were both Coke and Pepsi. Surprisingly, as far as I could find, they both came out with it at the same time, the 2-liter Coke bottles. And when I read that, I went, I very clearly remember that. It was 1978. And I remember my mom having this kind of dilemma Like we were at the store and she would be like, I don't know if there's any way we're going to drink all that. And I hate it when it goes flat because that is so much soda, which sadly today, nobody looks at it that way, right? A 2-liter bottle, you open it and it's pretty much gone really quickly, right? Back in 1978, we didn't drink much soda. For my family, my parents would have it with pizza usually, or maybe an Italian dinner. Like that was what soda went with. To this day, by the way, I still crave Coke Zero, which is my favorite kind of soda whenever I'm having Italian, especially pizza. Um, so that's just a little bit of my childhood, but but then she also thought it was so convenient. Like, wow. On the other hand, we could get all this drink in this big bottle and it's light, because before that you could buy your individual glass Coke jars. Jar, is that the right word? Bottle. Glass bottle is what I'm trying to say. And you could get your 1 liter, but this idea of 2 liters of soda, it was just like like I said, mom was torn. It was way too much, but yet how cool. And she was attracted to it too. And before long, we pretty much always had 2 liters in the pantry. Now, she was careful about, well, no, 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 we're not going to open a 2 liter just for this meal right now because we're not going to drink any more soda until next weekend. So we're not going to open the 2 liter because it's going to go flat, and then she would pull out the glass individual jars if we were having soda. But anyway, that's just totally a nostalgic thing. But it really struck me like you don't think about these things. You don't think about, oh, 2 liters have not always been around. I remember I was probably, I guess if it was 78, I'm not really quick at math. I was 9 at the time. And I remember when it was really a very new thing. So Google says that it wasn't until the 1990s that there was a significant shift. And at that point, plastic bottles became by far the dominant packaging method over glass. I think a big dilemma for a while with grocery stores, from what I noticed in my quick research, was milk. I guess that was one of the things they held on to the longest. They left the milk in the glass jars. And I do remember it's like a plastic handle, that you lift up the jar with. And I do remember it being like if you had a couple of them side by side, you always felt a little nervous about when you pick it up at the store. Oh, don't bang it against the bottle beside it. And for my family, because it was 3 of us, I do have an older brother, but he's 8 years older and was out of the house when I was only 8. No, I was 10. Sorry. Again, I'm not quick at math. When he was 18, I was 10. So it was just the 3 of us, and we would get the half gallons in, the paper carton. Paper? Is that the right word for it? That's plastic coated now that I think about it. I assume wax coated. I guess it's wax coated paper. Um, but I don't know. I didn't do more research on that. I don't know why the grocery stores seem to hold out on glass for milk longer than any other products they were selling. But then in the 1990s, all milk was sold from the grocery stores in plastic. So I understand the appeal. Absolutely do I understand the appeal. Like when I'm standing in our midden in our backyard, I'm going, I can't imagine all this glass in my life. And what really strikes me is how weird that it was disposable, that your pickles, well, pickles still come in a glass jar. I don't know why I decided pickles. Your mustard comes in a glass jar, or your mayo comes in a glass jar, and then you throw away the glass. Like that just seems odd to me because the plastic seems much more throwawayable, like not worthy of keeping, if you know what I mean. But I would feel overwhelmed with every single mayo and mustard jar, like, well, I need to keep this and reuse it because it's glass. Um, so that's what strikes me when I'm looking at all that glass around me in the trash area. But oh, I was gonna say, I get it that it was so convenient though, because for me, the main thing I think of is the breakage. How many things got broken? Like grocery stores must have had a lot more breakage because now you drop something plastic, and more often than not, it's not going to crack open and you can put it back on the shelf. But if you drop something that was in a glass jar, you're going to have a big mess. They must have had a lot more messes to clean up in the grocery store aisles when everything was in glass. I actually remember vividly because it was the reason I got my first ever stitches was because of a glass container in a grocery store. My brother was looking at mustard and ketchup bottles. I don't know what was intriguing about them. It was like new packaging or something. And he had to reach up high to get one of each. Well, it was high for me I was probably seven, maybe 7 year old. And I, of course, had to copy him because it was my older brother, and I'm tagging along behind him at the grocery store. Mom and dad were on different aisles. Dad was always very slow at shopping, and mom was always very rush, rush, get through my list. I want to get out of here and move on with my day. And dad would like to putter, my mom would say. He would like, so she would give him like two things that he was responsible for. And he would go to those two locations in the store and he would stand and look really closely at every label and look at the price and think about which would be the better purchase. And in the time she got the rest of the list, he got his two items that he was assigned. So the two of them were off doing their own things. And for some reason, my brother was bored and decided to look at the ketchup and mustard. And of course, being the adoring younger sister, I was just tagging along behind him. So I'm reaching up high, and I had to do exactly what he did. But in my 7-year-old brain, it didn't dawn on me that in order to pull out the ketchup bottle I was reaching for, the mustard bottle was actually in front of it, and I should have moved the mustard bottle first. But I yanked out the ketchup bottle and down crashed the glass mustard bottle, and I got a really big gash on my ankle. It was summertime, and I had on flip flops or sandals, and my ankle got cut really badly. I mean, there was like, I was 7, and in my memory, there was like blood gushing everywhere. My mom was panicking, and we quickly rushed to the emergency room. By the time I got done getting my stitches, it was dark outside, and we then had to go home and put away groceries. I don't remember though about the paying. Maybe mom rushed me to the car and found something to wrap up my ankle while dad quickly paid. I don't remember that part. But anyway, my point is glass in the grocery store can actually be dangerous. And plastic is not only less breakable, it's also so much lighter. It's just an easier product. And so I get it that for 30 or 40 years, we have been consumers liking the convenience of plastic and not thinking, at least most of us, about the health ramifications that might be associated with all this plastic. The first time that I remember thinking about plastic, I can tell you the year. It was actually 2012. I know this because the robotics team that I was coaching, it's a fantastic robotics program, and it's not just about building robots, it's about doing scientific research, and the kids can choose what they want to research. The sky is the limit. Well, the kids that year chose to research food storage, and eating healthier food. I don't know, I can't remember where the idea came from, but the team named themselves Play with Your Food, and the PLAY stood for 4 different things you were supposed to learn and do better with your food. Can't remember what those were. But one of the points was about, I don't know if it was storage or reheating. But what I learned, and I did not know, I remember it being a light bulb like, oh, really? Is that you should never heat your food in a plastic container because the heat can cause the chemicals in the plastic to leach out and go into your food. So 2012, Michelle's puny brain was first introduced to this idea and figuring out, maybe plastics aren't that good of a thing. So my point is, you know what? This is still a new thing to all of us. We're still trying to figure it out, right? Well, the study that I mentioned when we first started, the title is Heart Disease Deaths Worldwide Are Linked to a chemical widely used in plastics. So that's the title. And I will link this in the show notes if you want to read all the intense medical information. I'm just going to give you a brief summary, but the official study was from NYU Langone Health. Not sure if well, I'll just leave it at that. Okay. And the summary of this study, I'm going to read this to you. The analysis estimated that in 2018, DEHP, let me stop right there because I saw that and I was like, what's DEHP? It stands for, I'm probably going to butcher this, di, in parentheses, 2-ethyl hexyl, end of parentheses, phthalate. It's pronounced phthalate, but it's spelt pH phthalate. So that's where the DEHP comes from. I don't know how they decide which consonants and vowels to pull out of that. Couldn't even tell you, but those are the letters they pull out to abbreviate that as DEHP. It's a man made chemical, of course, that is added to plastics. And the point of it is to make the plastic more flexible, more soft. It has no color and it's a liquid. It does have a slight odor, apparently, and that makes sense because some of the things it's used in, you notice the odor when it comes new and we're unpackaging it, like shower curtains. Have you ever opened, the plastic liner for the shower curtain? And it has a pretty distinct smell. That's coming from the DEHP that's making that liner a soft plastic. It's used for garden hoses, medical tubing. How about that? Toys. How about that? Lots of things, lots and lots of plastics. So, to go back to what I was reading, the analysis estimated that in 2018, DEHP exposure, so this was just in 1 year, okay, and this was 7 years ago. So I can't imagine how much higher it could potentially be now. But it estimated in 2018, DEHP exposure led to 356,238 cardiovascular deaths. So, not complications, not some deaths, some problems, deaths. So, I can't imagine how many cardiovascular complications arose from it. That wasn't part of the study. Simply the people that died in this 1 year that could be definitively traced to DEHP. So that's another thing. It was definitively traceable to DEHP. We all know there could have been plenty of deaths that were labeled something else that in reality, the problem started with this chemical. But that's the number that are definitive. So we're talking almost 360,000 deaths because of this one chemical that is simply there to make the plastic more flexible. That's it. I want to pause for a second and ask you, have you thought about how this one thing that you probably use a good bit of is going to be impacted by tariffs? Have you thought about the tea that you drink? It turns out I was talking just recently to someone who works in the industry, and he told me that very morning, the price of tea from China to distributors here in the US had risen by 247%. Now, the company he works for actually had a nice amount of supply on hand, so it wasn't going to impact their prices immediately. But he guaranteed me their prices would have to double or triple before they started running out of their current supply. So, if you can find tea at a good price, it is absolutely the time to stock up. Tea will store for years if you keep it in a cool, dark place. And I've done that myself. It still tastes wonderful. But I wouldn't buy just any tea. I highly recommend our sponsor today. If you want to go to soulyrested.com/teas, TEAS. I share with you all of my favorite flavors and options that they have that are all organic, very high quality teas, but at an unbelievably good price, at least for now, before the tariffs hit them hard. So go stock up and use my code to save as you stock up. You can even stack my code on the bulk prices that they offer, which I highly recommend. Also at soulyrested.com/teas, I share with you some of my all-time favorite blends that I make myself, and I link to the teas that I use to make my blends. One of them is my family's all-time favorite replacement for Lipton tea. zero bleached tea bags, and zero pesticides on the leaves, but it tastes as good or better than the Lipton that my family would always drink before I started making this blend. That recipe, a lot of other ones, you'll find it all, and my code to save while you stock up. Go to solelyrested.com/teas, Teas. And another sponsor that I need to tell you about is Hearth and Homestead Store. They have become a first line of defense, protecting my family's skin from toxic, man made, carcinogenic ingredients. You see, at Hearth and Homestead Store, they are committed to synthetic free ingredients and they are completely transparent with their ingredient list. But they even go a step further. They use the best of the best ingredients, and this is what I love, zero fillers. Did you know that a company can call it tallow balm, which by the way, I know is all the rage now. You see it everywhere. But be careful because they can call it tallow balm and it have 20% tallow. And most of the time it is industrial raised tallow and 80% filler. But with Hearth and Homestead, it is 100% grass fed and grass finished tallow. 100%. On top of that, they infuse it with herbs and natural elements like magnesium. Bill and I and my mother in law love the magnesium butter. It genuinely took away my mother in law's restless legs, and it is so great at soothing sore muscles. I love the face serum. I love so many of the soaps. I love the perfume. It's all natural. You know what? You just need to go see. Either go right to Hearth and Homestead store, or if you want to see my personal favorites, go to solelyrested.com/soap, SOAP, and be sure to use code SOLYRESTED to save 15% on your entire order, every order. And if you're spending over 100, the shipping is free. You can't beat it. Hearth and Homestead Store. There's more here to go back to what I was reading. It particularly impacted South Asia, the Middle East, East Asia, and the Pacific. Another study found that DEHP exposure is linked to an increased risk of cancer in the American population, with the risk appearing higher, interesting enough, in males. I don't know why that is, and I did not research further why males are more subject to this, but so there you have it. I also don't know why this study, I mean, I guess, you can only study so much, right? I don't know why it specifically studied only one chemical in plastic because, of course, I can't even imagine how many chemicals are used in different types of plastic. But then, the more that I glanced at things and made some clicks on different things, I found out that studies estimate the average person ingests roughly 5 grams of plastic a week. 5 grams plastic a week. And that is the weight of a credit card. So, guys, we're pretty much eating a credit card every week. The plastic comes from all kinds of sources. So, it's in the food that's been packaged in plastic, it's in our water because the water is going through plastic tubing, and it's also in the air that we breathe. There are microplastics floating around. In fact, one thing I could have added to my list that I'm doing as a response to this, but I'm not yet, but I'll just tell you now, if I had an eighth thing, it would be to start purifying the air in our home. I should rephrase that. I do actually have an air purifier in our bedroom. So I am kind of actually doing this. Maybe I should have made it 8 things, but I'd like to be able to purify the air throughout the house, not just the bedroom. They say the bedroom is the most important thing because that's where you're spending most of your time in your home when you're sleeping. But anyway, so it's not just our food, not just our water, it's even in the air that we breathe. But I will say this study that suggested we're eating roughly or ingesting roughly a credit card's worth of plastic a week. I did find another study, and I'm going to link that in the show notes as well, that did say, it was from sciencedirect.com, that broke down in many ways that the first study was actually exaggerated information. And they were arguing we do not eat that much in a week. Even so, you cannot convince me that there isn't something really bad going on and that we we're definitely ingesting some plastic every week, no doubt about it. So even if it's a minuscule amount, even if we're only eating a credit card's worth of plastic in a year, there's still a big problem. So, what am I doing as a result? I have a list of 7 things, but the first one might be the most important. I am not panicking. As I sat down to read some things, read this research, I started to panic a little bit and I started to get really depressed. And I started to think about all the plastics in my life and in my home, even though I've been working at eliminating them since 2012 when Michelle's puny brain finally realized maybe I should be using less plastic. I still have a lot of plastic in my home and I started to get pretty depressed. And then I reminded myself, I'm not going there. I'm going to continue to do the little things that I can, and I'm going to add the little things that I can, and I'm not going to panic. So that's the first thing. Number 2, I am tossing plastic cups and most plastic containers. I did still have some plastic cups. I don't know if you know Tervis cups. I was very into those for a while. And I collected some of them, and some of them were my favorites that I still used often. It's like a double walled plastic cup, and I like that it's insulated so it keeps your drink cooler, but the outside isn't cold. If you're using a glass jar and it's a really cold drink, you're going to have evaporation coming down the jar. You don't have that with the double walled plastic cups, but I decided I was going to get rid of them. And if you noticed, I said most plastic containers. I am not a purist, and I'm telling you right now, there's some that I just can't get rid of because I use them for specific things that I can't imagine using glass for. So I am trying to get rid of them, but I'm only getting rid of most of them right now. And I'm definitely using more glass. I did find glasses that I think I've mentioned on here a few times that are thermal shock tested. They're actually canning jars, and the thermal shock testing is better than any other on the market. I did some research and I was really excited to find these jars. They have shown in testing to be 10% stronger. So that's important to me because I was saying it's kind of dangerous, right? Little Michelle who had to get her stitches because of the mustard jar. You don't want broken glass everywhere, and you don't want to have to go get stitches because of it. So to have the stronger glass, that is important to me. I have some thin glasses that I don't use as much. And like if I'm going down to the garden, I will definitely take this canning jar glass. If you're watching on YouTube, you see what I mean. It's a pint and a half jar that is nice because it's wide mouth and it can fit a lid, and I can have my glass straw in there. And this heavier glass is going to do better if I do drop it on a rock on my way to the garden or whatever. It's going to be less likely to break. And if it does break, it's not going to have all the tiny little shattered pieces. So that's one thing to think about when you switch over to glass. And I use quart jars and half-gallon jars a lot. I tried to get so many things, ingredients I use a lot, all my teas, my coffees, my espressos. I have converted over my pantry and kitchen cabinets to keep them in glass jars, just quart-sized jars. And I have lids that have a great seal that are heavy duty aluminum or gauge stainless steel. I'm going to get it right, that are going to last. They're not going to rust. It's just something that's really felt good. And it's taken me time. It's been a few years process of slowly starting to move things over to glass, but it feels really good. And then for the things I use more of, like dried fruit, popcorn for air popping, rice, sugars, most of them, stuff like that, I have in a half-gallon jar. Some of them, like my coconut sugar that I use a lot, like pasta, I have in a gallon-sized jar. And these are in cabinets in my kitchen and in my walk-in pantry, and also down in my root cellar in the basement. I've tried to switch as much as I can over to glass. And like I said, I'm using as much as I can these thermal shock tested heavier glass jars. And I will leave a link in the show notes to where you can get them. You go to Azure Standard and look up their glass products. Use code SOLERESTED and save 15% off your first order of $100 or more. Okay, this was not, I didn't mean to sneak that in, but there you go. What else? Oh, if you go to soullyrested.com/tools, that would be a good place for you to see these things I'm talking about as well. The jars, the lids I mentioned, a lot of things that are kitchen tools that are really helping as I switch things over from plastic. My number 3, I got rid of all my plastic cutting boards except for one. Bill is really attached to one. There's one that's the size he really likes, and he didn't want me to get rid of it, so I respect that. I kept the one that he really likes. He likes it for cutting cheese, is what he grabs it for. I don't know why he prefers it because I now have 3 different wooden ones that are the same shape and size, but he just prefers, I guess it's a little lighter, a little thinner. Hopefully he'll be on board and we'll be able to get rid of that one too. But except for that one, we've gotten rid of all the plastic cutting boards. I also got rid of something that you might not have thought of. I didn't think of this until rather recently. I had wooden boards that were not one piece. They had seams in them. I have gotten rid of all of them as well because those seams are held together with epoxy resin. And you should not eat off of epoxy resin surfaces. Some people are fine with it as like a charcuterie board or something, but even then, I just would rather not. I looked it up and Google says to not eat off of epoxy resin because it's not intended to ingest. While it is considered a food safe epoxy, it is considered inert and it's safe for incidental contact with food. It's not meant to be ingested or consumed. That's going to come in a minute. We'll get back to that. And Google points out that there is a potential for damaging it and then contaminating it. If you cut directly on an epoxy surface, you can scratch it, and then the damaged epoxy can potentially release microparticles and also harbor bacteria. Those are the 2 reasons I didn't want my wooden cutting boards anymore that had a seam. They were like pieces of wood put together into a wooden board. Got rid of those, and I found completely one-piece wooden boards that I have replaced everything else in my kitchen with. And I have all different sizes. They're all wooden now, and it feels good. If that's all that I did in a response to this study, I'd feel pretty good because I use those cutting boards a lot, and I feel like I have a much better option now that I'm going to on a daily basis. The 4th thing I'm doing is the plastic that I did keep. Those few pieces that I held on to because I use them a lot, I'm never going to heat them with food in them, which I haven't done that since 2012 if I could avoid it. But the other thing, and I feel crazy, I didn't think about this. I'm no longer going to put it in the dishwasher. I prefer to hand wash them anyway, but some other family members like to stick them in the dishwasher, and I've explained to everybody, let's not do that anymore. If it's plastic, leave it in the sink and I will hand wash it because the high temperatures and the detergents in the dishwasher can break down the plastic and it can release chemicals in the plastic that will cause the chemicals like the DEHP to migrate out of the plastic and, of course, then seep into your food that you're putting in those containers. Also, if they become cracked in any way or cloudy, that indicates you really should get rid of them because those chemicals are breaking down. And when they start breaking down, they're going to be leaching into your food. The 5th thing that I'm doing is this one is actually a maybe. I really don't know, but I thought it was worth putting on here. I could maybe consider looking at labels, and it has to, if I am going to buy it, if it's a plastic item, it has to say that it's phthalate free, which remember I told you is spelt with a PH. So if you're looking for it, it's PHTA. I'm sorry, let me start again. PHTHALATE. It's pronounced phthalate, but it looks like phthalate. I want the label to say it's phthalate free if I'm going to be buying something that's plastic. But you know what? We've talked on here so much about this, guys, the evils of marketing, that it's all the rage for companies to find what it is that the consumer today is concerned about and jump on that bandwagon. And in the end, the product could have so many other evils in it. But if I'm a consumer that's concerned about this study that just came out and I'm looking for phthalate free items, then I see that and I go, boom, I can buy that. It's safe. I equate that with being safe and it's not. So I don't even know if I'm really going to care about this, but I thought it was worth mentioning that if you are going to buy plastic, maybe at least make sure that it's phthalate free. The 6th thing I'm doing, This one might come as a little bit of a surprise for you. I'm doing everything I can to use less aluminum cans for sodas, vegetables, if you're buying canned veggies, because all of those are lined with a thin plastic coating. And that coating is made from epoxy resin, what I was just talking about with the cutting boards. Funny enough, Google makes it really clear you really shouldn't eat food that's on this. But at the same time, guys, we're drinking things, we're eating vegetables that we think are good for us, we're eating canned fruit that we think is good for us, coming out of a can that is lined with epoxy resin. Not really the best choice. And I figured I'm actually excited about this. I was going to plant even more of the vegetables that we eat the most of. By the time that spring is rolling around, we've usually gone through our reserves from the garden from the previous summer. And what I buy is canned green beans and canned corn. So this is going to look different for you and your family. Think about what it is that you buy the most in tin cans, aluminum cans, and think about if there's a way that you can either grow that food or source it from the farmer's market, find a local farmer you can buy it from, and preserve it yourself. For me, the number one way that I love to preserve food, because it's so easy in every way, is dehydrating. So I'm going to dehydrate a whole lot more green beans than I have in years past. And hopefully, since I planted twice as many, I'm not going to have to buy any canned green beans this upcoming year. That's my goal, because I'd really rather not have epoxy resin lined green beans. um, if you want to know more about dehydrating, there are tips and tricks that it took me way too long to figure out. Like, I'm talking decades. But once I figured them out, it was a game changer, total game changer. I don't like canning. I can now officially say I hate canning, but dehydrating, I can totally get on board. And I have figured out a way to make the best dehydrated foods. If you want to go to soulyrested.com/dehydrate, you can check out my dehydrating academy, and you can use code podcast for all listeners. You can get 35% off the already discounted price and start learning how to do this, so you too can either get your food from the farmer's market or grow some in your backyard and dehydrate it yourself and have delicious veggies all year long with zero plastics. Let's see, I think I'm on number 7. Oh, also, sodas. I mentioned they come in tin cans. I am making even more kombucha, and I am making our own sodas. I do have a soda machine if I want to add carbonation. I very often don't. I never add carbonation to kombucha. It naturally will carbonate. But I have a soda machine, and I have recipe to make your own DIY Coke. I have not come up with a recipe yet for DIY root beer. I'm much more of a Coke fan myself. But I also have kits that I buy if I don't feel like making it. I have amazing organic soda and root beer syrup kits that I highly recommend, and a discount code for you. All of that stuff you can find at my page that breaks down all my favorite ingredients, soulyrested.com/ingredients, and check out how to make your own soda. Guys, game changer. And again, not lined with epoxy resin. And number 7, drum roll, please. I'm eating less packaged foods. I've been working at this for a decade, and I've thought of a few ways to eat even less. And that's the secret, to always just keep moving forward. It's sometimes an uphill battle and you don't really feel like you're going forward, but you are. One small step. Think of one more packaged food that you can eliminate. Think about what your family eats a lot of that you could somehow eliminate by making it yourself, or finding a better version of it, or finding a better option to replace it. For me, I have replaced cereal, because cereal boxes come with plastic liners inside. Crackers do as well. And also, yogurt containers, there's plastic, a lot of it, right? juice bottles. So I'm making less juice. I'm using a lot of Relight actually, which is an electrolyte that I love. I'm making my own yogurt now, storing that in a glass jar in my fridge. I'm eating less cereal by making my own granola. And I have a recipe for you. If you just search granola on the blog, solely rested, SOULY rested.com, and do a search for granola, you can find my recipe. And I use that as a cereal. Just add some milk and it's delicious. And I am flaking my own fresh oat groats, which is the equivalent to fresh flour, but it's in oat form. And you can make your own oats and make your own instant oatmeal. It's actually so easy. I don't know why this is like a secret that nobody talks about, because it should be talked about more. I bought an oat flaker and I buy my oat groats from Azure Standard and I make sure they're organic, and I'm making my own oatmeal. So instead of cereal that comes with the plastic liner, I am making granola or I'm making oatmeal. And I love it. And they both have so many varieties, so many options. I don't need to get sick of it because there's so many ways to make both of these, right? Which is a great thing about handmade items. If you're making it yourself, why did I say handmade? Homemade. Um, the sky's the limit and you can make it exactly the way you want it. Such a great thing. I'm also making crackers now. And if they do get a little moist or a little stale, they only last for a few days when they're fresh made crackers. Super easy to toss them in my dehydrator. And after a few hours, they are back to crispier than when I first brought them out of the oven. They're delicious. And again, they don't have the plastic liner that they're stored in for who knows how long until I wind up eating them, right? So, those are my 7 items. To recap it, I'm tossing my plastic cups and most of my plastic containers and switching things over to glass. I'm switching to only one piece wooden cutting boards. I'm not heating up any food in plastic and I'm not putting it in the dishwasher. And as soon as it looks at all compromised, it's getting tossed if I do, those few pieces of plastic containers that I do have. And I am possibly looking for phthalate free on the label if I'm buying plastic. I'm growing and dehydrating a lot more food this year, making more of my own kombucha, and I'm making my own sodas. All of that is avoiding the aluminum cans with the plastic liner. And I bought an oat flaker. I'm making my own oatmeal. I'm making my own granola. I'm making crackers. And most importantly, I saved the first one for last to simply remind you I'm not panicking. So, by the way, I just glanced at my notes and realized there was one other thing I learned that I found pretty interesting. The first food, processed food that was packaged in plastic went way back to 1890. Well, I should say a bag, a moisture barrier. I don't know what kind of plastic it was or what exactly the barrier was, but way back in 1890, the National Biscuit Co., which is now Nabisco, National Biscuit Co. I never knew that's where Nabisco came from, but that's why it's called Nabisco. Their first name was the National Biscuit Company. They first packaged their biscuits. Some people, different places I looked, said it was their oyster crackers that they did first. So one or the other, their biscuits, their oyster crackers, they packaged them to preserve the crispness with a moisture barrier, is how they described it. And the funny thing is, they were so busy preserving food, keeping it crisp for you, keeping it fresh like, right, for you, but it was void of any nutrients. It was made with processed refined flour that they had taken all the nutrients out. They had used added chemicals to preserve it for longer. And then they put a moisture barrier around it, which probably was made from chemicals that were leaking into it. And all of these things were to make the food better, she says with air quotes. So anyway, I just thought that was an interesting little piece of history. Never knew that's where Nabisco's name came from. So anyway, just a final reminder, I'm not panicking, guys. It's important to stay aware of things like this. And it's important to make changes when you can, but take them one simple step at a time. Do not let it be overwhelming because there's just no point to that. And it certainly is not going to help your health if you start getting depressed over stuff like this. So do what you can, make a little change. You'll feel good about it, I'm sure. Thanks for listening. Remember, it is easy to forget how blessed we are to live this life. So enjoy the simple, everyday efforts. It's not easy, but it sure is a good life.